From high above Times Square, Midtown Manhattan, third most listened to show in all of America. Bobby Jindal is the governor of Louisiana. I know Bobby slightly. I mean, it's not like we're palling around or anything, but I've met him a couple of times, and I really like this guy. I think he is not your typical politician, which is, thank God for that. He is he's a frank speaker, I think, and understands small government. He's got a new book out called Leadership and Crisis. And there's a couple of things in here that I wanted to get him on the phone and talk to him about. Bobby, welcome to the program.
Glenn, thank you so much for having me on your show. It was great seeing you in New York last week.
Was that in New York? Where did we see each other?
We were actually, you were coming out of an office in New York. It was just a pure coincidence. You and I had the privilege of first meeting. You were giving a keynote speech over to the NRA in Kentucky. And I loved you back then. I've been on your show before in other stations, but it's great to be on your radio show. And I wanted to tell you, by the way, I've been keeping up. I looked at your new website, theblaze.com, thought you had some wonderful, anybody that hasn't looked at it, some wonderful insights into this whole TSA mess and controversy. I mean, if I was a parent of some of those children going through what they're going through, I tell you, it just shows how crazy the world we live in is.
You know,
today.
Bobby, what should we do on that? Because first of all, there's something wrong with this story. We're being presented false options here, and you know, to be more secure, we have to let some 40, 50-year-old guy fondle my son in his junk, and that's not going to happen. Otherwise, I have to put my wife and my daughters through scanners that can see absolutely everything, can capture, can save, and can send those images. I mean, neither of those are good options. What should we be doing?
Glenn, you're exactly right. And look, I know you and I both agree that we don't want to take the threat casually, but here are two fundamental mistakes I think this administration has made. Number one, they are so focused on treating terrorists like citizens and citizens like suspects. They worry so much about the rights of the terrorists. Where are the rights for the average American? They need to move away from political correctness. You and I both know there's no reason for them to be groping that 6-year-old, that 5-year-old, that 10-year-old that's traveling to their grandparents' house, going for Thanksgiving, going home to see their family. There's no reason. The only reason is political correctness. Why not focus our resources on those that we know that we suspect are really posing a real danger to us? But here's the second mistake they have made. They continue to try to respond to this terrorist threat with a defensive posture. You know, we got lucky with the underwear bomber. We got lucky with the Times Square bomber. We got lucky with the packages. Luck is not a strategy. This president, and I have a whole chapter in the book about the war on terrorism, my concern is this president, he believes that if he apologizes for America, he believes that if we're not offensive to our enemies, he believes, if we show that we're not only an ally to Israel, he believes somehow we can make these terrorists less angry with us. He also believes that this is something about social justice. They just have more of our money and economic development overseas. Nonsense. This is a clash of fundamental values. This is a group of people that hates our way of life, hates our liberties. They don't want land. They don't want money. They don't want appeasement. They don't want.
Wait a minute. Are you talking about the terrorists? Or are you talking about the Obama administration now?
I'm talking about the Obama administration's approach to the war on terror, and it is a good thing certainly that we harden our infrastructure, but we can go to absurd lengths if we don't understand the conflict we're in. You know, I make no apologies for the fact that America is an exceptional country. What amazed me was when the president was asked about American exceptionalism, he responded, well, I'm sure other people are proud of their countries. When he was asked, remember, he went abroad and talked about being a citizen of the world. I don't even know what that means. The reality is the world needs America to be stronger. That leads to a more secure world. We have saved the world now. We're on the third fundamental, just in the last 50 years. The first time we saved the world in World War II from fascism. We saved the world during the Cold War thanks to President Reagan from communism. Now we are tasked again with leading the fight. Now, we had allies. We had other freedom-loving countries that joined with us, but make no mistake about it. America carried the burden. America led the fight, and we're called again to lead the fight. And what worries me with this current battle against these terrorists, what worries me is that if we don't understand the conflict we're in, and President Reagan understood we were fighting an evil empire in the Cold War, the
Yeah,
the editorial pages didn't want to call it that. The academics didn't want to call it that. Let's not gloss over the conflict we're facing right now with these Islamic fundamentalist terrorisms. And you know, the Homeland Security Department, they want to call these man-made events. You're not supposed to say Islamic in front of terrorists. Let's call it what it is. That's the only way. If we don't identify this enemy appropriately, it's the only way we can win this war.
Well, do you think that it's possible that the president has just misunderstood when he said, when somebody said we don't check any packages, now he just wants to check everybody's package? I think that's maybe what.
Well,
I'm just saying.
But you know what? What's amazing is they don't get it. This administration is so disconnected from the facts on the ground.
May I take you here? Page 20, Leadership in Crisis, the book. I just want to read. Excuse me. I don't know why the scary music started. Here it is. The White House certainly knew that the moratorium could cost thousands of jobs. You're talking about the moratorium on drilling because of the oil spill. The White House certainly knew that the moratorium could cost thousands of jobs, and they went ahead anyway. When I raised concerns about the moratorium with President Obama, he assumed that I was simply parroting these words because I was supposed to say them. Quote, I understand you need to say all of this. I know you need to say this, that you're facing political pressure, he said. He didn't seem to understand that for us in Louisiana, this was the reality on the ground. This was about people losing their jobs. He responded by saying that the national polls indicate that people supported the ban. The human element seemed invisible to this White House. That seems to be, they have contempt for the American people, or they're blind to the actual American people. Comment?
And you saw that with the election a couple of weeks ago. The American people said we want smaller government, less taxes, less spending, less borrowing. What was the president's response to this rejection of Obamacare and the $14 trillion of debt? He said it was a communications problem. He said he just hadn't given us enough speeches. What you read between the lines, basically, he's condescending. He's speaking down to the American voters and American people, saying, you people just don't understand all the great things I've been trying to do for you. If I would just give more speeches, maybe you would understand, and you will vote Nancy Pelosi back in as Speaker. Glenn, you're exactly right. We saw it during the oil spill and the moratorium as well. At one point, he actually told me, don't worry, Governor, your workers can get a BP check. And I said, I don't think BP is giving them a check for this moratorium. And then he said, well, don't worry, they can get an unemployment check. And there's a disconnect.
Oh,
he
my
doesn't understand.
gosh.
Wow.
Oh, my
people don't want an
gosh.
unemployment check. They want to go back to work.
Governor Jindal, did I hear that he also said something to the effect that you better not make it sound like he didn't care about people? Did he say something along those lines to you?
You know, the two interactions that were surreal to me, the second time he came to the state after the oil spill, he ended his meeting by basically telling me and the parish president of Plaquemines Parish that he didn't want to see us going on TV to criticize him. Now, he was very specific. He said he was mad that we kept going. He didn't want to see us on CNN. So I'm assuming, Glenn, we can still go on Fox and other channels and criticize him. But apparently he was frustrated that we were going on TV to criticize him. His first visit down there, the very first time he comes to Louisiana after the oil spill, he pulls me aside in a publicity stunt. He is angry, and I can understand if he was angry about the bureaucratic response, the oil spill, the loss of life. Glenn, I would have understood that. That would have made sense to me. He was angry about a bureaucratic letter about food stamps. He said, careful, this is going to get bad for all of us. Glenn, you've got a White House, a president that seemed more worried about perception and politics rather than actually cutting through the red tape. And I'm in the book Leadership in Crisis, got all kinds of stories of red tape and bureaucracy where
Bobby,
they didn't move quickly.
Bobby, do you watch the TV show enough to have a handle on what I believe is going on in this White House?
I do.
Do you think I'm wrong on who these people are and what their agenda really is?
But Glenn, I think what scares me, the reason I wrote this book, is I don't think that two things. One, I don't think they share our belief that the Founding Fathers intended a limited government. I think they are trying to institute a permanently larger, more expensive government that's more intrusive with higher taxes, higher spending. The second reason is that I believe the American dream, I do believe in my bones we live in the greatest country in the history of the world, but I also believe we could become the first generation that leaves fewer opportunities for our children if we're not careful. We're at a tipping point, 14 trillion going to 26 trillion. 18% of the GDP historically is what they spend. Now they're up to 24. They want to go to 26%.
Oh, my gosh.
Make no mistake about it. I don't think that the president I think he's a smart man. I think they know what they're doing. But what also worries me is they're not surrounded by people who've worked in the private sector. And as a result, I think they've got a lot of people that have Nobel Prizes, PhDs, book smarts, but they're not surrounded by people that have actually created jobs in the private sector. He described his one job in the private sector as like being an enemy, as being a spy behind enemy lines. It worries me when the president describes the private sector. He describes the private sector as the enemy. That's not what you want to hear coming out of the White House.
Bobby, so what is the solution here? Because I think people are, at least this audience, is awake. And they're saying, okay, so so then what? What do we do? And I don't think that it is a political solution. What is the solution in your view?
Well, Glenn, two things. I've got a whole chapter in the book saying it's the culture, stupid, basically saying that it's not about, what makes America great is not just our economy, our military. It's not just our democracy. All are great things, but it is the culture. The Founding Fathers understood this American experiment. What made it so exceptional was grounded in a moral, virtuous, religious foundation. We must not lose that culture. That's what's at risk here. But I also have a chapter in terms of structural changes we've got to make to Congress, because it's not just electing a new group. It's about a balanced budget amendment in the Constitution. It's about a two-thirds vote before they raise our taxes. Line item veto, get rid of earmarks. But here's the most radical idea. And we used to pay farmers not to grow crops. Let's pay members of Congress not to come to D.C. Let's make them a part-time Congress like the Founding Fathers intended. Let's make sure they have jobs in the private sector. Let's give them term limits. Don't let them be lobbyists. If they have to live under the same rules we do, maybe you'd see more common sense. You get rid of the permanent elite political governing class. And if you did that, that's what the Founding Fathers intended. They had to go home and be farmers. They had to go home and be small businessmen. They had to go home and work in their factories and their shops. Instead of thinking their future is going to work for some lobbying firm in Washington, D.C., full-time legislators spend more of our money. Mark Twain had it right. Our wallets, our freedoms are safest when the legislature is not in session. This is the most fundamental truth, and I know you've articulated this so many times. If we could just, I thought if there's one thought we could, I was trying to get across in Leadership in Crisis, it's this. The more money they spend, the more they tax, the more they borrow, the more they regulate, the less freedom, the less liberty we as American people have. It is a zero-sum game, and if we can continue to help educate people at what's at stake here. When you're talking about $1 trillion health care expansion bill, what's at stake is our freedoms and our liberties. That's what's at stake. That's what the message from the election was a couple of weeks ago. And what worries me is Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid, President Obama, they're just doubling down. They think it's a communications issue. They think they just need to do a better job talking to us. They don't realize that there's a fundamental shift happening in our country.
All right, Bobby Jindal, the name of the book is Leadership in Crisis. Bobby, I'll have to send you a copy of my book, Broke, because one of the solutions in there, we are on exactly the same page. Get these people out of Washington. Get them out of Washington. And do what even Texas does. Real quick, I'm coming down to Louisiana. I'm coming to New Orleans to do the first show I've ever done in New Orleans. I'm doing it with Bill O'Reilly. When is that? The 6th? Is that next weekend, I think? I'm going to be down in New Orleans. And I know this is the home of SEIU and Acorn. Do I need extra security, Bobby?
If you do, I'll be happy to provide it. You got an open invitation for dinner with my wife and I. Would love to see you come down there.
Well, my wife is coming. We'll talk offline because my wife is coming as well, and she's never been to New Orleans. So I'd love to see if you're around. I think it's December 3rd. Bill and I are there.
And don't judge Louisiana by Acorn. We've got a bunch of God-fearing, wonderful, patriotic red, white, and blue Americans. We have, just to give you an idea, we had 3,000 Louisiana National Guardsmen in Iraq this year out of the 50,000 troops still there in August. We've got some incredible, incredible patriotic Americans in Louisiana. You're going to be very, very well received. So don't judge us by Acorn.
I won't. Bobby, thank you so much. We'll talk to you again.